Every once in a while I see a mildly amusing meme which I then scroll past and forget about. Then, weeks later, it has successfully carved out a territory in my brain in its mimetic struggle for survival. In this case, it's the suggestion that good world building simply consists of your personal kinks, your political power fantasy, some esoteric magic system, and maybe some characters if you feel like it. Combatants Will Be Dispatched is a light novel, manga and anime from Natsume Akatsuki, better known for creating Konosuba, and it suits the meme really well. He certainly channeled a lot of energy into fanservice while writing it. It uses two separate magic systems, which the novels have only begun to scratch the surface of, and it even has a bunch of endearing characters. Most notably, however, is that the main character is working for an evil megacorporation fixated on world domination, and throughout the story it becomes more and more clear that these are still unambiguously the good guys. To this end, Natsume appears to channel every single argument made by Nietzsche to leave behind our current moral framework in order to revitalize Western civilization. I will be spoiling many events throughout all 7 light novels that are currently out in this video, but by leaving details vague and without context, I hope I should be able to pique viewer interest without ruining their enjoyment of the story. If you enjoy Konosuba, I'm confident you will enjoy Combatants from the very first chapter. If not, there's still a high likelihood you will be completely hooked by the 4th light novel, as the writing quality and attention to consequence are drastically improved from that volume onwards. I would advise against starting out with the anime, but would heartily recommend both the light novel and the manga to anyone interested, as the manga adaptation is very faithful and have a lot to offer in how scenes and characters are presented visually. When you're done with both, even the anime offers some new scenes, as they invented an entire filler story for 3 of the most underrepresented characters. The story follows Combat Agent 6, a lowly combatant for the Kisaragi Corporation, as he is unceremoniously isekai'd to an alien world to scout it out as a potential target for conquest. The initial reason given is that all the combat agents will end up unemployed when there is no more world to conquer, so he needs to prepare a new one for them. Being an evil megacorp, they strongly encourage 6 to be as evil as possible and do whatever it takes to set the stage for their invasion. He arrives in the world with only the armor he's wearing and his android lolly assistant Alice. To requisition more equipment, he needs to pay for it with evil points, which amass as he commits evil deeds. When I first started reading Combatants, the evil points was my biggest question mark. At first, you are supposed to simply suspend disbelief and accept the premise. After all, the evil deeds are supposedly ranked and points are assigned by a brain chip, yet points are awarded when a faraway trap is sprung without 6's knowledge, and even one of the smarter members of Kisaragi uses the presence or absence of evil points to determine if disasters were her fault or not. It is even greatly implied that the ship is able to determine if a target consents to the actions done to them. It's internally consistent, but we don't yet have an explanation for how any of this could be possible. Even accepting all of that, there were a lot of inconsistencies that initially came off as strange if Kisaragi merely cared about maximizing evil and cruelty without a greater utility in mind. Laying a hand on children is punished by immediate execution, proving there are evils that are very strictly off the table for them. And while sexual harassment is generally permitted, if not outright encouraged, going any further than that will result in punishment. Even using the implication of rape to extort someone is not allowed, judging by Alice at one point informing a captive that 6 is not permitted to follow through with his threats. The greatest evidence that these rules are utilitarian in nature is that corruption and embezzlement is highly encouraged unless the person is making themselves rich off Kisaragi funds. It's rewarded as long as it's not used to undermine the corporation. Put plainly, the points are clearly an incentive structure meant to encourage some behaviors, with strict rules making sure Kisaragi employees are molded into a certain kind of evil. As was stated, the ultimate goal of Kisaragi is to conquer Earth and then move on to conquer and colonize this new world too. As the light novel makes blatantly clear from the start, the new world is seen as a solution to food shortages from population growth, land pollution due to war, and the reduction of habitable land due to rising sea levels. They later on confirmed that these are the issues they intended to fix by taking control of the world by force, and that this new planet is a last resort in case Earth is truly beyond saving. Considering the state of pollution in parts of our own world, it's easy to understand how one could come to the conclusion that the powers that be will not be able or willing to clean up this mess if left to their own devices. Forceful occupation with intent on using their iron fist to undo the damage no matter what it takes, however, might be able to accomplish something. Of course, waging war upon 2 entire planets isn't something for the faint of heart, and so the incentive structure of evil points is there to force combat agents to become more and more harsh. There are 3 factors determining how many points are given for any deed. The first is guilt felt by the perpetrator, the second is the trauma inflicted on the victim, and the third is some objective measure of how great the deed was. The feeling of guilt will naturally fade over time as agents become desensitized, which means they would need to commit worse and worse deeds for the level of guilt to stay constant. This hardens their hearts. The trauma felt by the victim will similarly fade over time, but in this case it means that the combat agents can't simply harass the same person forever, when the same acts would have a greater yield if done to those with fewer hardships. This makes the combat agents spread their activity far and wide. The magnitude of the deed is the only variable they can easily control. When they no longer feel guilt for their actions, and when their targets are themselves hardened to their deeds, there's only one way left to farm points: commit atrocities on the grandest scale. Considering we see Agent 6 go from flashing citizens in public to bombing enemy cities throughout the story, I'd say it's fair to conclude the points have had the exact intended effect on him. It reminds me of this game I used to play when I was younger, Overlord. It's like Pikmin but cool instead of gay. You play as an evil overlord who conquers the world, and you terrorize your subjects to increase your corruption level. Of course, you could just go on a killing spree to increase your corruption, but if you do, there won't be any citizens left to terrorize. You need a sustainable long-term plan so you can carry out greater evils in the future. Evil points work much the same. At one point, 6 considers harassing a young lady while she sleeps, but changes his mind last second when he realizes that the mere act of breaking into her room to watch her sleep earned him a lot of points. If he reveals his presence, he wouldn't easily be able to repeat it. And so, it becomes a routine to break in at night and farm her for sustainable evil points instead of ruining it with a single short-sighted payout. With that in mind, there really isn't much reason for combat agents to commit unnecessary acts of cruelty against innocent civilians. Of course, that's on top of the fact that combatants are useful enough to the local government that minor misdeeds are overlooked and permitted, while outright murder would clearly put them on hostile terms with their only ally when they are still early in their invasion plans. If anything, they take the opposite approach. They take in war-torn refugees, they provide them work, feed them, and even offer education for their children, all to foster greater loyalty to Kisaragi. The current adult generation is indebted to them for their aid, while the younger generation is indoctrinated through education. There's no pretense about this being charity, as the end goal is for the refugees to be turned into loyal subjects that are eager to fight for Kisaragi should the need arise. With that groundwork, let's look at Friedrich Nietzsche's view on morality to see how they line up. The man viewed the modern society, even of his own time, as degenerating due to its moral values, and he firmly stated that Europe needed a new kind of leader to instill new values in their society. Among these degenerating values, Nietzsche most strongly opposed the idea that to minimize suffering was the greatest good. Overcoming hardships makes you stronger, and he observed that mankind has grown most vigorously under the most adverse conditions. While a comfortable existence makes mankind contemptible in nature, great suffering has produced all the elevations of mankind in history. He views the most fundamental driving force of all life to be the will to power, the desire to overcome opposition and force yourself upon your surroundings. This is how evolution manifests in his eyes, as those most able to overcome the hardships around them and with the greatest will to spread is able to propagate their genetics, while those who lack the will or ability to continue their genes die out. This is how he describes the birth of every higher civilization, as strong and unbroken barbarians conquered weaker and more peaceful people, establishing themselves as the ruling class. Their role is both keeping their servants in line, but also keeping foreign barbarians out of their own territory. He even goes as far as to define ugliness as signifying decadence and degeneration, as we evolve to appreciate that which reinforces and celebrates the will to power, or will to life, while we have grown instinctively to detest that which causes a decline in our will. To struggle against entropy and build greatness out of our surroundings in our image is beautiful. To rest on the laurels of our predecessors as we stagnate and succumb to entropy is hideous. This is where Nietzsche claims there has been an inversion of values during recent human history. Something on occasion referred to as slave morality, as the lowliest humans view themselves as morally superior to their betters, specifically due to their own inferiority. Strength and greatness were once considered moral goods, but now instead the wretched, poor, weak, needy, sick and loathsome are instead considered saintly due to their low status. They jealously decry those above them as evil simply for inspiring such jealousy. With slave morality in mind, it is thus evil which is necessary to achieve greatness for mankind. It is also this evil, the will to power, which must remain undeterred by modern morals in order to create something great. And he who hath to be a creator in good and evil, verily he hath first to be a destroyer and break values in pieces. Thus doth the greatest evil pertain to the greatest good. That, however, is the creating good. Back to Kisaragi, we have a self-proclaimed evil organization set on world domination who put their employees through intense hardship and reward them for hatching sustainable evil plots of larger and larger scale, as well as for having the strength to carry it out. Employees are nudged to abandon slave morality and embrace the will to power. They are irreverent of what they have to trample or destroy in the process or what suffering they cause, largely because of the greatness of what they are trying to build. Conquering and ruling two entire worlds requires a lot of destruction, but that is merely the first step to building a greater world. They even put a heavy emphasis on aesthetics, with leaders who stand out with sexy uniforms and combatants who all exclusively wear black power armors in order to look the part of evil henchmen. It means Kisaragi, who is imposing their will on the world, has a distinct style, and wouldn't you know it, that too is something Nietzsche called beautiful. The powerful stamping their will upon the world around them. Beyond merely spreading suffering and imposing their will by force, their evil serves as a catalyst for improvement in itself. When Six first became a combat agent, he took special interest in sexually harassing a coworker named Yukari. She had a great body but was self-conscious about her looks due to being incredibly tall. Six explains his harassment offer was to convince her that she had a lot to offer. Not only that, but he says she used to leave herself vulnerable as she didn't consider herself to be attractive enough to be at risk. So, he sexually harassed her so that she would learn to put her guard up, in case one day there would be someone with truly bad intention who tries to take advantage of her. This isn't too unlike how Six flashes random women in the street at night, then mutters to himself that they really shouldn't be out on their own so late. His misdemeanors might make them more guarded in case they encounter worse people at night in the future. Kisaragi is also responsible for attacks on other cultures and nations in order to stop practices they view as barbaric, such as human sacrifices. They will not peacefully let those cultures continue their savagery, they will not attempt diplomacy, they will do what it takes to force the human sacrifices to stop. Finally, as mentioned earlier, they even take care of the refugees displaced by their warfare. As part of their operational manual, they set up soup kitchens to keep their new subjects fed and foster loyalty among them, so they can be used to further the company's goals later. They set up education for the refugee children, which doubles as indoctrination to make the children loyal to Kisaragi from an early age, and to impart Kisaragi's worldview upon them. This is not much different from education in the real world, which will generally educate children on why their own society is good, as the alternative would mean raising a whole generation who would wish to get rid of their entire social order. It's counterproductive for a functioning society. We get a greater understanding of how the evils of Kisaragi are a force for greatness when looking at how self-proclaimed heroes act in the story. Six himself once wished to become a hero back on Earth, but got disillusioned with how artificial they are. They are managed like idols and cannot engage in any activity that would be inappropriate for the children who look up to them. So already we can tell something's off, but we see and hear of so much more. Six describes heroes as people who are convinced beyond a doubt that they're always in the right. They have zero intention of seeing things from anyone else's point of view, and while they go around talking about how much they love peace, I've never seen them try to resolve anything through negotiation instead of launching straight into a battle. Kisaragi does what they do because they believe it must be done, even if it would be considered evil. The heroes, in contrast, do what they believe is good regardless of consequences. Their belief that they are in the right is a shield for the consequences of their actions, no matter what. This is seen in practice when one such hero is confronted with what she has done, and she has no other defense than that she must stop evil no matter what. So, what are these actions committed by self-proclaimed heroes? They make extremely generous donations as charity with the assumption that this will only be beneficial, when it in fact ends up facilitating crime, lining the pockets of corrupt merchants, and undermining the nation's entire economy. They sabotage industries and attempt kidnappings in order to rescue workers they view as being exploited, even when the workers themselves are more than happy with their working conditions. They act as judge, jury, and executioner in foreign nations without any jurisdiction whatsoever. They simply decide that a person is evil and carry out an execution without a second thought. They place a bounty on the head of a foreign political figure and spread falsehoods to justify the bounty, which, combined with the crumbling economy due to the charity, ends up leading to several assassination attempts, completely destabilizing the ruling force of the nation. They have an absolute intolerance for anyone they deem to be evil. While this part is mostly implied, they are shown to be willing to place bounties and carry out executions because a magic rock tells them a person is evil, and it's implied they are even okay with declaring war against nations which obstruct them in carrying out their justice. One can only wonder what happens to someone with an evil soul in the nations occupied by heroes. Despite their zero-tolerance policy for evil, they are more than okay with allowing human sacrifice to continue unchallenged for generations if putting an end to the practice is deemed too challenging and risky to be worth it. Yet at the same time, they are willing to condemn entire civilizations to oblivion for the sin of progress. If they develop to the point where they may soon discover dangerous technologies, they must be wiped out. It's for the greater good of the world, you see. I picked up on a lot of these parallels to Nietzsche while reading, but it's only in volume 7 of the light novel that I was convinced it was no coincidence. Six finds out that a rival organization of heroes are die-hard obscurantists, and he is appalled by their evil. Obscurantism isn't exactly a concept talked about frequently in our current day, so I was surprised to see it come up. And would you look at that, Nietzsche is directly quoted on the top of the Wikipedia article due to his relevance to the topic. Much like Nietzsche, Kisaragi abhor obscurantism. Six describes it as the act of restricting the available knowledge to the people, steadily eroding their level of education to ensure that the masses are too ignorant to question the political status quo. This is very similar to Nietzsche's own description that the essential feature of the black art of obscurantism is not its intention of clouding the brain, but its attempt to darken the picture of the world and cloud our idea of existence. In essence, this turns the population into a mere resource to be managed by the elites, and it's no wonder the supposed good guys immediately pivot to how great population control is as a means to combat resource shortages. Just get rid of your people! If all other information is obscured, the people have no choice but to accept the messaging they are given. The praise for obscurantism and population control, by the way, wasn't made by one of the heroes. Those words came from the mouth of the chieftain of a savage tribe which had been permitted to exist by the good graces of a heroic order that act only in the name of what's good and just. She's just spewing the propaganda of her rulers. But to be fair, she probably doesn't even have any concept of how the world would look like without her masters. The values of Kisaragi are clear. We see there is no duplicity among them, but true sincerity in following their cause. Their purpose have shaped them on every single level of their organizational structure. Combat agents are some of the lowliest members of the organization, but serve as proof that they will accept literally anyone no matter their past. Unless they touch kids, in which case death is all that awaits. Anyone else is accepted. They abandon their former names for anonymity, their pasts are kept confidential and they are discouraged from sharing. All that matters is their current camaraderie forged on the battlefield as they carry out their missions. Evil points allow every single one of them an equal chance to prove themselves through accomplishments and eventually climb to higher roles in the organization. It is suggested Six could climb to the rank of Supreme Leader if only he hardens up and carries out great enough deeds of evil. Much of how combat agents operate is covered by handbooks, everything from how to act as charismatically evil as is expected of them, to how to use festivals to make money and evil points through crooked stalls, and even election rigging if you feel like it. Of course, they are also encouraged to come up with their own evil ways to earn points as long as they don't break any company rules. Six himself is throughout the story forced to become more villainous due to the circumstances around him, and now I'd say he's well on his way to earning that promotion, whenever we get more volumes. Six's subordinates that he recruits in the New World are eventually integrated into Kisaragi's structure, and it somehow manages to turn their worst character flaws into great assets for the company. Rose is a chimera who is incredibly useful in battle and not much else, and she can be easily swayed with the promise of food. She's also instinctively drawn to those far stronger than her and is more inclined to take orders from them. In essence, she is nearly a perfect Kisaragi combat agent. Before she joined, she was treated as an expendable freak that was a drain on resources and only useful for violence. That's not exactly wrong, but it does lack the deep respect Kisaragi have for her. She now does the exact same job as before, but is celebrated and rewarded for it. Grim is another outcast. The hag femcel archbishop of a dark god who desires marriage above all else but scares everyone off due to her obsessive and possessive nature. There are rare few moments where she shows off her spiritual and saintly side, but even this is often revealed to merely be an attempt to keep up appearances. Last we saw her, she had taken up regular position volunteering for the Kisaragi soup kitchen, which of course is revealed to be an attempt to groom the refugee boys into having a thing for kind older ladies when they grow up. Yeah, as I said, she is just doing it for selfish reasons, but maybe we shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth with volunteer work to help the needy. Finally, there's Snow, an exceptional knight of a local kingdom who climbed her way to her position from growing up a broke orphan. Few things matter more to her than money and status, so she is willing to do nearly anything to acquire and retain them. She is incredibly conniving and corrupt, with very few moral limits, putting even most of Kisaragi to shame, and she does not need fixing because she's mine and you guys need to stay away from her. Not only is Snow an exceptional fit for Kisaragi, but she eventually manages to hit a stable position of serving both her old kingdom and Kisaragi part-time, strengthening relations between the two and lending her service to both her bosses. Turns out, someone so adept at playing the political game who was dirt on nearly everyone is pretty useful to have on your side. As below, so above, the leaders of Kisaragi are no different in essence. While they get far less screen time than the main cast, an official website which is incredibly outdated and rarely allowed to stay up helps fill in the blanks. The first of the supreme leaders is Astaroth the Ice Queen. She inherited great wealth and a large family-owned corporation. After her friend was orphaned by an armed conflict, she was initially intent on hanging all the elites, from the rich to the world leaders, but instead, she ended up using her parents' Kisaragi corporation to pivot into world domination, trying to build something better out of the world we have instead of only destroying it. After all, a bunch of dead leaders and a power vacuum is not going to end well. Next is Lilith, a prodigy mad scientist with practically no moral qualms about her research, which is among the many reasons she's unpopular with her subordinates. Morals aside, her methods clearly work as she's managed to develop teleportation technology, managed to surgically activate psychokinetic abilities in people, turn people into hyper-powerful mutants, and much else. Not only has every combat agent gone through her enhancement surgeries, but even the supreme leaders must go through the process. They have faith enough in her research to put themselves on the operating table, instead of mandating that only the lowly soldiers take that risk. It's further proof that the entire organization has the strong cohesion of a family, instead of just treating employees as replaceable cogs who should make sacrifices for the leaders at the top. The third and final supreme leader is Belial, who was always one to make sacrifices for the sake of others. This led to her undertaking a more invasive level of surgery, granting her the greatest powers in the organization at a tremendous cost to her own well-being. She uses this abnormal strength to cut through any Gordian knot that would impede the others. While her companions have to come up with elaborate schemes to overcome great foes, she effortlessly crushes those foes under heel. Even when a challenge might prove fatal to her, she does not back down. It doesn't matter if it's to protect her old friends or strangers she just met, She will face any challenge in order to protect what she holds dear and correct the world into the Kisaragi ideal. While not quite a supreme leader on par with the big three, the rookie mutant Snake Woman who appears in Volume 6 onwards proves to be one of the most interesting characters for exploring Kisaragi's morality. The magical morality detecting crystal the heroes use confirm her to be one of the most pure-hearted characters in the entire setting, and yet she willingly and eagerly aligns herself with Kisaragi. What we get of her backstory reveals she understands the burden of leadership, and we see in the story that she, much like Belial, is willing to make great personal sacrifices for the sake of others. She's still a softie that struggles to even delegate risky or unpopular tasks to her subordinates, but it's something we see her work on overcoming. The only way I can interpret this dedication is that she understands the necessity of Kisaragi and agrees that their strength is the best way forward, even if it will make her do things that goes against her nature. She doesn't have the heart for evil, but she tries. Future volumes will tell how she develops from here, but she's already one of the best characters in the story. I hope this video will prove to be predictive for Natsume's plans in future volumes, so I don't end up looking like an idiot the second volume 8 drops. At this point I don't think it can be dismissed as coincidence that Kisaragi's mindset aligns so closely with Nietzsche's own views, especially concerning the will to power and the inversion of morality he believes has led to the downfall of the West. Considering the fact that normally Nietzsche's works are almost exclusively drawn from to create compelling antagonists that may have a point about the world, I find Combatants to be a unique example of exploring what his ideas would look like if carried out completely with utter sincerity. But if you check it out, remember it is still an isekai ecchi comedy story by the author of Konosuba, and adjust your expectations accordingly. There won't be any dense philosophical discussions about conflicting ideas here.